Hello everybody, welcome to Crashing Your Planet, brought to you by Spark and Fizz. This is Jake McKelvey, and I would like to thank you for choosing this podcast to listen to. As we all know, you're only allowed to pick one, and some of you have elected that Crashing Your Planet is the one podcast that you're going to listen to forever. So thanks. Thanks to everybody who submitted iTunes reviews for the Comedy Minus One vinyl CD bundle giveaway contest sweepstakes that we ran over these last couple of weeks. We appreciate all the reviews we got, and I'll announce the winner of that contest on the tail end of this introduction. And thanks again to John Solomon, who was the guest on the previous episode, and who was generous enough to put up a couple of records and CDs for us to use for this contest that we did. So that was real nice of him, and we appreciate it. So today on the show, I'm talking with Jeffrey Lewis. You might know Jeffrey from his music. You might know Jeffrey from his comic books, or his artwork, his illustrations. You might know Jeffrey personally, and maybe he doesn't like you very much, so he doesn't talk to you often, so you're listening to this podcast to simulate what it would be like to have a conversation with him. Regardless, I hope you know Jeffrey Lewis, and if you don't, then you're going to soon, so thanks for tuning in. So as you may or may not know, Jeffrey is a New York City-based artist. He has a new record out that's called Manhattan. It came out on Rough Trade Records on the tail end of 2015. There's also a new issue of his comic book series, Fuff. It's Fuff number 11 that came out in March of this year. And you can get both of these things, among many other things, at his website, thejeffreylewissite.com. You can go there for tour dates and for all your other Jeffrey Lewis inquiries that you might have. By the way, this is the first in-person interview that we've been able to do for this show. My band was lucky enough to play a show with Jeffrey's band a month or so ago in Lowell, Massachusetts at the Uncharted Gallery, and Jeffrey was nice enough to sit down with me for an hour or so and talk about music. I genuinely took a lot away from this conversation, and I appreciate Jeffrey having taken the time to sit down and talk with me for a little while. And it's just nice to hear the insights of someone who's been doing this indie rock thing for as long as he has, and I learned a lot just listening to him. And I think whether you're a musician or a fan of Jeffrey's or just someone who enjoys hearing people converse for an hour, I think there's something to be gleaned from this one way or the other. So thanks for listening. We're just going to do the contest winner announcement real quick, and then we're going to play a song off of Jeffrey's latest record. The song you're going to hear is called Out of Town, off of that Manhattan LP that I mentioned a moment ago. You can go to thejeffreylewissite.com and grab a copy of that. And let's do this contest announcement right now. The winner of the contest was, and I can't believe I have to say this username out loud, but the winner is Booty Bomp. Thanks, Booty Bomp, for submitting your review on iTunes. Please reach out to the Spark and Fizz Facebook page to claim your prize. Give us your address, that sort of thing. And everyone, please, keep your eyes peeled for more announcements. Hopefully, we'll be able to do more giveaways and things like that in the future. So thanks to everyone for submitting, and hopefully there will be more opportunities coming up. All right, I'm gonna play you a Jeffrey Lewis song. Then you're gonna hear me and Jeffrey Lewis talk. The song you're about to hear is called Out of Town, off of Jeffrey's latest LP, Manhattan.
Is it Friday or Monday? I'm not sure without you. All the days go by in such a boring blur without you. I hit the snooze 10 times before I stir without you. I get up but I can't recall what for without you. The houseplants aren't doing very well without you. The recycling's starting to pile up and smell without you. My sense of up or down goes straight to hell without you. Now's the time to go back to bed, yet I can't tell without you. without you. I got an old half cup of coffee I'm reheating without you. I don't go out 'cause there's no one I'm meeting without you. And there's no way I'd spray the shower curtain grimes without you. Why try to rid the kitchen sink of slimes without you? Why stop that lousy cockroach while he climbs without you? I still can't finish Friday's crossword in the Times without you. She's out of town. She's out of town. She's out of town, visiting her mother. And I tell a joke, but don't nobody laugh without you, because I'm like a tall tree with no giraffe without you. My stock has dropped so low it's off the graph without you, and it's only been 1 weekday and a half without you. So was it Friday or Monday? I'm not sure without you. All the days go by in such a boring blur without you. I hit the snooze 10 times before I stir without you. I get up but I can't recall what for without you. She's out of town. She's out of town. She's out of town, visiting her mother. It's a very sleazy table.
Yeah, I made that observation too. So just to kind of go over it before we get into it, sort of the idea is just to have this be as much of a not like interviewee sort of thing as much as a conversation we would have had otherwise before playing a show together, you know? So with that being said, don't feel any obligation to, I don't know, say anything.
Okay.
Don't feel any pressure. So you're in Worcester last night. How was Worcester? Have you played in Worcester before?
I don't think I have, not that I recall. It was a cool place, the Neggy House Show environment. It's the first time I've ever seen a porta potty indoors. Have you been to that place?
Yeah, I played there a year or so ago. I don't remember that though. I don't think that might be a new.
You go to the bathroom. You go downstairs through the textile sort of weaving room, and there's a door that says the bathroom is here. So you open it and you expect to find a bathroom, but it's a door to another room, and in the middle of that room there is a porta potty, and I found that very unusual. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And the band that played, we finished playing, and then the organizer of the gig said, okay, and now this band is going to play, but we have to stop the music by 11 p.m. or something, so they only have 20. And I was like, I felt like a big dick, because I was like, I didn't know there was a band playing after us, and that there was a sound curfew, and like we were eating into their set, and now like they're only going to get to play for like 18 minutes or whatever it was, because like I just felt, because I hate when that happens to you as a performer. Yeah. When you're playing a bill, of course, everything gets pushed back later and later, inevitably. And then you're the last act of the night, and then all of a sudden the organizer is like, well, we have to stop music in 5 minutes, so if you guys want to play one song, you can do it. And I just I thought we were the last act. So, of course, you know, I wasn't as time efficient as I could have been about not chatting between songs or about getting set up to play or whatever it was. And then I was just like, you know, I hope this other band doesn't hate us. But they were awesome. That band, Yeah. Right. It's like, who's on first? Yeah. You know that band? Yeah. I'm just doing who's on first. Sure. Like,
who?
Are you fans of theirs? Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's kind of thing could go on and on.
Right.
But the thing that made them particularly special, I mean, I thought they were really good, just musically and everything else, and the crowd was, you know, moshing, and it was just very fun and high energy for the brief. Well, they were able to do like 4 or 5 songs, so it was a set. But the keyboard player had no keyboard stand, so he ended up having to sit. So he was, well, I'm not going to lean on this artwork, but you know, while there's like a crazy not quite a mosh pit, but there's people like dancing and bouncing off each other, and you know, the band is here, drums, bass, guitar, whatever, and then like the main, you know, he's like he's got a microphone and a keyboard just in his lap, and he's just leaning against the wall with his legs out on the floor, just playing and singing. And it was just so cool.
Yeah.
I was like, you guys got to do this this has to be your thing. Because that just made it so unique and like gave them this quirky thing that they would not have had if he was just there with a keyboard stand and a mic stand. They just would have been a regular band, a good band, but a regular band. Mm-hmm. And that little quirky gimmick, I thought, just made the whole scene like really special. So
that's cool. Yeah. So
that was cool.
That guy's a goof. I mean, we know that band pretty well. We played them a bunch of times, and you don't have to worry about them being upset with you. I don't think.
They seem cool, you know. But it's awkward. In fact, this whole tour is sort of awkward, really. Truth be told, because Teenage Halloween.
Yeah.
Like Luke, we had done a couple gigs with those guys and house shows in Philadelphia and in New Jersey and stuff. And they're very young and enthusiastic, and they wanted to do a tour with us at some point. And I was like, well, if you want to book it, for one thing, that's, because people are always happy to do a tour with us if I'm going to put the tour it's like, but what's in it for me? It's like, it takes a lot of work to do a tour. Like,
sure.
All right, you want to do a tour, so that means I have to spend, weeks of my life like emailing and putting this together. So I'm usually like, well, I don't know, if you book it, then we'll play it. But also I need to make a certain amount of money because I'm paying my musicians.
Yeah.
I'm paying for the gas. And I'm in a position at this point in my life. I mean, I'm 40, so I'm not, I don't know. Those guys are like 18 or 19, so for them it's just an adventure. Of course,
right.
Everybody likes to make money, but for me, I was like, if you're gonna book shows for my band to do, and we're gonna do this tour, we need like $400 a night, 350, 300 minimum, but 400 is what I would hope for in a what I would consider a good situation. Otherwise, like I don't know, I'm like an old dude. I've done a million tours. I've been touring for, I've been doing this 15 years now, more longer than 15 years, and it's my job. But my job is really also writing songs and drawing comic books. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to drive 6 hours to play a show just for a tip jar. It's actually better for my audience if I stay home and write a new song. Why should I spend that time driving and playing old songs? I got to at least come home with $100 out of it.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not going to drive up to Massachusetts for like a tip jar or for $50 or something. It's like at this point in my life, I've just realized like, it's not. I'd rather just be home with my girlfriend, drawing in my sketchbook or whatever it is. I might come up with a new idea, whatever it is. It's at least that's home time is at least creative time. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to be on the road, I know it's not creative time, so it has to be money-making time, and it's not a lot of money, but I need to have a guarantee that there's going to be something, or it's not worth it for me. So my intention that maybe they would book this tour was that they would be maybe booking at universities where there's an entertainment budget or something like that.
Sure.
But the fact that it's been these kinds of like DIY punk house shows, all ages kind of thing, it makes me feel guilty because like then the promoter's got to cough up this $400, and these are just kids. There's like 17-year-olds there. They have no money. They're like, what, and then everybody, and then all these other bands. Of course, when you do these shows, everybody wants to be on the shows. Then there's 3 acts, 4 acts, 5 acts, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And everybody else is getting paid like, whatever, $10, here's $7.50. I don't know what if they're getting paid anything.
Sure.
And then they're like, oh, there's no money for you because we had to give the Jeffrey Lewis band $400. You just feel like a big jerk. You're like, well, it's not appropriate for this environment for me to come in here and demand a $400 guarantee from 22 kids with pink hair that are like, throwing in like 52 cents into the whatever it is, and then the promoter's got to go to the ATM and get money out for. I'm like, I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
But I don't know, So that's where we're at. I mean, I love playing house shows,
And I do it all the time during the course of a year.
Yeah.
If it's on a tour. In other words, if we have a show, maybe I've got a $500 show in Boise, and then the next night we have a $300 show in Missoula, Montana, and on the night in between, we need to find a show in between, so we'll do a house show, pass the tip jar, we'll get $14.22, whatever, but it gets us to the next gig.
Yeah.
We do tons of that.
Yeah.
But to specifically leave New York City to go someplace, it's like, why would I even do that unless they're guaranteed to pay us a few $100?
Yeah.
So that's the way this tour feels at the moment. I kind of feel a little bad that we're getting like 300, 350, 400 a night at gigs that are not really funded to, the infrastructure of it is not really appropriate to that thing.
Yeah, yeah. So, when did you? Is that a recent thing where you've decided, like, when did the change of heart sort of happen?
A big part of it, it probably happened a little earlier than 2012, but 2012 was the time when I transitioned from having, my brother, who was always the bass player in my band since we started in 1997, my brother Jack was always the bass player, and then we had a couple different drummers over the years, but our most long-term drummer was my old friend Dave, who was our drummer for about 8 years. But Dave moved to England, and my brother Jack moved out to Portland, Oregon, and it just became very difficult to function with me in New York City. I mean, somebody 3,000 miles this way, 3,000 miles that way. They didn't want the travel complication. It was like we wanted to have more money, and also my drummer at that point, he had been playing with a band in England that was a much more professional unit with a tour bus, tour manager, booking agent, all this stuff. They weren't booking their own shows, staying on people's floors, driving themselves in a funky old car.
Yeah.
So he was like really pushing for me to get my shit together and be like, you're a great songwriter, you've got fans, stop treating yourself like dirt. Like, you need to push your career to like a professional level, otherwise it's not worth it. And at that point he had a wife, a kid. He's like, it's not worth it for me to go on tour with you playing for peanuts. It's your own he was saying it's my responsibility as the guy in charge of the band to like kick it to a higher level, or it's not worth it for him. And the conflict eventually led to him not being in the band. So I started a new band from scratch in New York City at that time, maybe January 2013. And then up until that point, which was already however many years that was, 10 years, longer than 12 years, everything up until then, everything was split evenly between whoever was in the band. If we were a duo, if we were a 3-piece, if we were a 4-piece, whatever money came in, equal split among anybody there. But that system really was breaking down because nobody wanted to do the low-paying tours.
Yeah.
People would be like, well, I'm not going to go on that tour with you because that's going to be peanuts. I'm only going to go with you on the lucrative tours. So then I was like, this isn't nobody was all in. Nobody was okay with riding the low times in weight of the high times. So I was like, with the new band, if I'm finding new musicians, I'm just going to make, it's like, you each get $100 a gig. I'll pay you a certain amount an hour for rehearsals. I'll pay you a certain amount for each gig. And that's just like a flat rate.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's been the last 3 years or whatever it's been. So each show I know in advance is going to cost me X amount of money because I'm guaranteed. They don't have to worry about the finances. I pay them X amount, and it's all on me to provide the track. I pay for all the gas. I pay for work. I pay for the flights. I pay. Everything is like me keeping track of the finances and making sure that it's all going to work out. And if and then I keep the extra money if and when there's extra. Of course, I make more money because the merch is mine, the comic books are mine, the recordings are mine. So I'm aware that even though on one hand I'm playing the pity card, like, well, I got to pay for everything, like, but it's like, yeah, but still I'm doing okay. Even in the worst case scenario, I'm still selling my merch. So it seems fair enough. Mostly, it's still sort of an experiment. You're constantly.
Right.
I'm sure from traveling with your band and yourself, like you're I mean, maybe it's always, what's your methodology, and what have been your trial and error learning experiences?
Well, we don't do as much like long-term touring. We do a lot of one-offs and a lot of weekends. And we're actually at kind of a pivotal point now because my two bandmates, for the majority of our existence as a band, were both in college, and I've been just kind of working and whatever. But now one of the guys has been graduated for a year or so, and he's working full time and doing that thing, and the other guy is just about to graduate and gonna figure out what he's gonna be doing. So we're kind of at a point where we're probably gonna be maybe in sort of a similar boat, where it's gonna be, first we need to figure out how often we'll be able to tour that will accommodate everyone's working schedules and that sort of thing. And then if we're going to do that, is there going to be, how's the money thing going to work? Because now we're all just going to be, we're not just, college aged kids just like goofing around on the weekends and stuff like that. We're, in theory trying to be a band, and, so I don't know if I can speak to it so much because we've never made money. To this point, we haven't done anything to make money. If when we tour for a week or two, we keep everything, all the money together, and then we just divvy it up evenly between the three of us after the week or two is over when we're on our way home. So
what about expenses? I mean, stop for gas. Who's paying for? Do you have like a band fund?
Yeah.
All the money goes into that.
Yeah. And
is paying out of that, and then. But what happens when that money runs out? What if you're like, we don't have enough money to pay for this tank of gas? Who's paying for that?
We have also, from the time we started, we've had a band fund, and we've just funneled money into it and rarely taken money out of it, only for printing new CDs or T-shirts, any merch, whatever.
Putting money into it just from show pay, or
right.
From the three of you contributing out of your own pocket?
From show pay, yeah. So it's just a completely flat, like, no money's being made, no real personal money is being put into it, little bits here and there, food or whatever. But yeah, so we're not, I wouldn't say we're really, I don't want to speak as though I'm in the same boat, because we're sort of approaching that as opposed to you who have kind of, you're on the tail end.
How old are you?
I'm 23.
Yeah, I mean, when I was 23, I hadn't even played. Well, yeah, when I was 23, I hadn't even played a gig.
Yeah.
I was playing open mics. I just started writing songs when I was 22.
Yeah.
I didn't even play with it was just me and my brother Jack would occasionally play open mics. I mean, I was playing open mics every week. Once in a while, Jack would join me, and I probably played my first gig the year that I turned 23. I was still 22, and the open mic was like, well, if you have a half hour's worth of songs, you can play
Yeah.
So I was like really starting from scratch. I didn't know anything about touring. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't have any it was just not my realm. It was
Right.
like a very slow, the first time I did any kind of tour, I would have been God, if that was like maybe say 2002, I was 5 years old, I would have already been like 26, 27, like the first touring experiences. So, yeah, I mean, you're way ahead of you're way ahead, miles ahead of me.
You kind of painted an interesting picture where you went from talking about you're doing this little mini weekend tour with a bunch of, teenagers or early 20s kids who are I'm sure everyone you've played with this weekend, and all the people that have seen you, everyone is just so excited to be playing with Jeffrey Lewis,
or they're like, who's this old fart? Fuck him. Why is he taking all the money? Why is he bringing this corporate attitude into our little scene?
Well, I think as far as the bands, at least, I mean, I know Luke and them, basically what I'm getting at is there's kind of that side of things, and then you're talking about your former bandmates who are telling you to get your act together and be go take the next step. So you're sort of like riding that line between the two,
which isn't I wish we had somebody else here from an even different perspective to add to this conversation, who's been through, if we were if John Darnielle was here,
yeah.
or if anybody who has gone through, the transitional phases that you're at and the ones that I'm at, and seen it from some other level that neither of us are at, to be able to contribute to to that end of the conversation, because, for you and I, we don't even know what it looks like from that end of it. What was it like? See, I don't know. The bands that have overnight success, like a band like The Strokes, that's from their first demo, they're on the cover of magazines. They never have that experience of spending 10, 20 years working their way up, doing open mics, house shows, small club shows. Really just, I'm old buddies with Dan Deacon because he went to my college, and I don't know, we've never had a hardcore bro down or anything, but we're old acquaintances. We'll bump into each other at different music fests and stuff. And he really he's a guy that I know who really built himself up from hardcore Greyhound bus touring up to a level where now he's a significant component in the music industry, and he probably has, if he wants to, he could have, I don't know how much of an infrastructure he actually has in terms of, does he have somebody booking gigs for him? Does he have a management team? Does he have a PR? Does he have a salary that he pays the musician? I don't know what he's got, but he certainly had to go through a number of transitions, I'm sure. To go from where he started to where he is now.
Sure.
Same for Langhorne Slim, who's another guy whose hat I'm wearing. A guy who went to my college that I knew him from, just a college open mic. I wasn't even really writing songs at my college open mic. I would always come up with something to, maybe I would read some poem that I liked or something. But I thought he was phenomenal just from the first time I saw him at our college open mic. And Langhorne Slim has always been, he's just progressed and progressed, and I think his last album got 5 stars in Rolling Stone. He's played on, I don't know if it was on Letterman or on Conan O'Brien or something. He's in a much more so he's had to go through a lot of, I don't know how he pays his bandmates or how they deal with all of that infrastructure either. So you wouldn't even have to be as big as the Mountain Goats to contribute to this conversation from a new perspective. But it is interesting because there's no handbook for any of this, and we all just kind of learn through our own trial and error.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. It's a super weird thing. I don't know, to put it into that kind of perspective of, what do you think? Do you think that, I don't know if this will make sense, but keeping in mind, the bands you just kind of listed as examples, what percentage of bands that are on the radar now do you think have done any form of that, starting from scratch and just sort of spending 10 years or whatever building up, and how many of them do you think are buzz bands that just kind of caught the wave at the right time?
That's a really interesting question. Maybe there could be a little disclaimer on every band's album, like the way that there is on cans of beans or something, what the content contains, how many years they, I always think about that when I love the Rolling Stones, and especially the early Stones albums, and they do a great version of the song Hitchhike, and I'm did Mick Jagger ever have to hitchhike? I don't know. And I feel so bad for them that they didn't, that they I'm there's a romance to Roughing It, and I'm some of these bands, they just skip it, and then they can't even do it. When you're the Strokes, it's can you really just sleep at people's houses on tour? Can you play house shows? You're locked out of that world. And there's a huge amount of the whole interesting experience of doing this. If I look back at all the years I've been doing this, the memories that I have are not the times that we stayed in a hotel or got paid well for playing some professional festival or whatever it was. All the memories are man, I can't believe we made that. We really scrambled to make that tour work, and we did. And then we ended up at this crazy commune house, and they fed us this incredible meal, and they it's all of that adventure part of it is so much of the great stuff, and you just feel bad for these bands that have no. They have just never experienced any of that, and maybe they never will. And it would be interesting to really sort out who, because there's bands that I don't know what they did, Did Modest Mouse go through a house show period? We just did a tour with Andrew Jackson Jihad. And those guys definitely went through, they came up through the whole very, up by your own bootstraps. But I had no idea that they were at this other level now. When I agreed to do this tour with them, it was an utter shock to me from the first gig. The first gig of the tour was actually in New Orleans, right? And New Orleans for me has always been a very small area. They're not big on indie rock.
Yeah.
So even when I've opened up for much bigger bands on U.S. tours, the New Orleans show was one of the smallest shows of like their, bands that would be playing to 1,000 people in New York City were playing to like 35 people in New Orleans. So that's what I expected, and that was the first show of the Andrew Jackson Jihad tour that we just did a couple months ago in November. So we got to New Orleans and played this show with them, and there's like, what I forget, it wasn't huge. There's maybe like 90 people there. But I was like, wow, you guys are doing really great. You got 90 people out of New Orleans. That's the most people I've ever played to in New Orleans. And they were like, this isn't much, And then from that shows on, when we went to Florida and everybody else, they're playing to 300, 500, there's like 500 people at some of these gigs.
Yeah.
And and they've got a tour manager, a sound guy that travels with them, a van full of gear. They're still loading their own, they're not rock stars. And they know, they know the road, they know the whole scene backwards and forwards. And they're, it's not like they're in a privileged position. They're still but they travel. They have somebody running their merch for them. And they have these audiences, and they have the budget to pay us very generously just as to be an opening band in territories where we don't sell that many tickets. And I was like, wow, I was just so impressed that they built themselves up to that level, because I remember those. I mean, I never knew them that well, but I was aware of them, and I knew that they were one of those house show kind of real DIY bands that were kind of building a word of mouth following, and they've really, they're taking those next steps now. So that's another one, and and of course the Mountain Goats is a classic example. But I do wonder. It'll be interesting to know how many bands have had that sort of upbringing and how many haven't.
Yeah, because I mean, we're in sort of a weird spot right now. I feel like, I mean, I don't know how well how much time you put into keeping up with what's new and what's hip, but
not so much, but I can't help but be aware of it, just because we play these festivals, and, and it's like, oh well, that's or you can't help but be aware of it at a certain level when you're like, oh, there's an interview with me in this magazine, so I got to buy a copy of it, and then I end up seeing well, who are these other bands that are getting interviewed or something? So then you're sort of you're a little hipper than you would be otherwise.
Because it seems like I struggle to keep up with it, because I don't know, it just seems like the time between a band being a new band that no one's ever heard of to them being the thing everybody's talking about on, I don't even know what blog to reference. Pitchfork seems not the right one, but
I know even saying that makes you seem old.
Yeah. But you know what I mean, right? It's there's just kind of these bands that just from one day to the next, they're just, everyone cares about them. And I always wonder if this is a brand new band that just kind of it was just a right place at the right time kind of thing, considering how sort of in the whole slacker lo-fi, whatever is just the thing to do right now, I wonder how much time led up to them. Have they been a slacker lo-fi band for 10 years, or did they just realize it's cool to be a slacker lo-fi band and then they started one? And then how long is that popularity gonna last, considering the landscape?
Right. Longevity is not it's a very small percentage of any act in music, or probably in all of entertainment, that has any kind of extended career or extended creative validity, or and it's scary for me doing it so long. I'm no matter how good my next album is, does anybody really need 8 Jeffrey Lewis albums? It's if you already got 7, like what would I have to do to make something? It's like, do I need to make another, like, if somebody wants to hear a Jeffrey Lewis record, there's enough that already exist. Like, do there need to be 50 of them? Like, what do I have to contribute? You know,
Yeah.
so that's always, you always like face that, like what, no matter where you are in the longevity thing, you know, if you make one record, then you're like, well, damn, we made our statement. Like, why do we need to make another? Like, that is our sound. That's who we are.
Yeah.
Like, now we're supposed to progress and like, well, what developments are we going to have for the next record? We're not interested in having any developments. Those were our best songs. Like, why should we make something else? So that's a very, yeah, it's always like a weird thing, especially for bands for some reason more so, but maybe that's just because that's the world that I'm closest to, so that's where I can understand it more. But it's probably the same for painters or for, I don't know, for athletes or something. But then it doesn't really matter, I think, for those buzz bands, if they make money at it. Why should they want to do it forever? You know, if they have a couple of years where they're playing festivals for 10 grand or 50 grand or whatever, you know, and they're having fun and they're not worrying about like getting into debt with the record label, you know, they don't
Yeah.
they're not looking at like building a 10-year, 20-year thing out of it. They're just like, we had a blast for a couple of years, you know, and then we went off and did other things. You know, we made some good money, we got drunk, we had sex, we had adventures, we trashed hotel rooms, whatever it is that people do to have, you know, and they weren't thinking whatsoever about, you know, and why should they think about a long-term career? Like, that's, in some ways, that's almost not cool. It's like, that you're not, the rock and roll is not supposed to be about responsibility. It's like, it's almost like if you're thinking about being responsible with that world, you're already like not rock and roll. So that's a tough thing to navigate, which is why, from my perspective, a band like the Minutemen, you know, all the classic, you know, indie ethos bands that are sort of like, you know, make a sort of working class point of pride of that longevity and that kind of like, you know, we want to maintain this as a career, this is a job, this is what you got, you know, like that is of course very appealing to me, because that gives me something to, you know, those are like ideals that I can use to just to help navigate and to justify what I'm doing, because I'm obviously not going to be a big artist. I'm not a buzz band. I never had that ambition. I never had that intent. I got so much bigger than I ever thought or intended to be. My entire interest in making music was just like, if I put these songs on tapes and they're good, if these songs mean something to somebody, they might dub that tape and play it for their friends, and maybe it'll like get out there in some little way. And then, you know, that already, it's gone so much bigger than that for me for years now that it's like, I didn't even realize this many people would like my songs. I never thought, and still never have the thought that like I could get big. It's not like I'm going for like, what's the ambition to have? Like, I'm like, I'm not going to sell X many records. There's just not that many people in the world that would like this sort of stuff. Like, I'm not trying, I don't have the ability to make stuff that a lot of people would like. The stuff that I like is not stuff that a lot of people would like. So it's like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it in some way that's like in a very small, self-sustaining way from the get-go, because it's like, it's not even like, oh, we'll do this for a while until we get here and then we get there. It's like, there's no place to go. It's like, this is it. So I just have to make sure I can make this work, and keep being creative and keep, you know, making work that I feel excited about. So, but for these other bands, like, they're actually in a position to make big money and sell a lot of records, and then why should you do that forever? Just make some money and then do something else with your life.
Yeah. That's a really interesting kind of perspective on that whole thing. I'm not sure. I feel like there's a few ways that I could, like, there's a few follow-ups, and I don't know which direction I want to go in. But I guess part one, I'm going to ask two questions at once, and then we can just kind of see where they go from there. So part one would be, do you have any sort of like chip on your shoulder for those buzz bands or anything like that? Does it ever annoy you when you see those types of things occurring? And then part two would be, in the context of what you're just saying, and you know, with like a band like the Mountain Goats, what do you like? I feel like you could be what the Mountain Goats are, and that's for what it's worth. I don't know. I guess I'm just wondering, like, what do you think is preventing that from happening? Because it's similar, sensibilities and things like that. So, I don't know. I guess answer whichever of those you want to.
Let me think about this. Do the buzz bands annoy me? Well, of course, you're going to gripe about that sort of thing because everybody probably always feels like their own friend's band or the bands that they're into are really good. It's like, damn, man, this band just never gets any credit. Like,
yeah.
I love these guys, and I've seen them play, and they're just like the best band, they're one of my favorite bands in Manhattan right now or whatever it is, and like this other band that's blowing up, like, they just suck or they're boring or, But I think everybody always feels that way, that like there's an unfairness and like these guys are so overrated. Like, this is nonsense. Like, I know so many bands that are better than that. So there's a certain kind of like unfairness and then a certain temptation to take pot shots at like, Vampire Weekend fucking sucks, man. Those guys are so fucking lame. It's like anybody that gets that kind of success, like, you automatically have to like over exaggerate how much you don't like them just to like take them down a peg because of how lucky they've been or how the success that they've achieved. But there have been a number of situations in which there were bands that I automatically didn't want to like just because of the red carpet that's rolled out for them and the whole nonsense of people scrabbling over them and how so much of it, because the thing is, I'm so content oriented, which is a little bit out of step with a lot of this stuff. I have no surface is not what I'm interested in whatsoever. Partially just because I don't want people, I'm not in this for people to look at me. I don't think I have anything to offer in terms of like what I look like or what I act like or even what I sing like. I'm not interested. That's part of why it's always just been like Jeffrey Lewis. Like, I'm not, like, I have like a boring name. I don't care. I didn't come up with a band name. I didn't come up with a thing. Because Daniel Johnston was my biggest inspiration. I was like, that to me is the most important. Every time I get distracted or confused by any of this, I'm just like, just look to Daniel's cassettes. And the lesson is always like, nothing matters but the songs. I don't care what you look like, what you sing like, what you record like, what your fucking amplifier is. If you can take a piece of paper and put one word after another and sing it and that makes me laugh, makes me cry, makes me think about things, makes me see the world in a different way, that's what it is. Like, and that was like, for me, that revelation, which is a revelation for me every day, basically, it never stops blowing my mind to come back to that fundamental thought. That's what I don't hear in any of these bands.
Yeah.
I don't care who they are. Even the ones that I respect and like, they don't do that for me. Like, there's a lot of bands that I think are great or that I really respect, and they don't make me laugh and they don't make me cry and they don't make me think, but they're great in their own ways, and they're not interested in, they don't want to be Daniel Johnston, they don't want to be Lou Reed. Maybe they want to be the Rolling Stones, maybe they want to be Led Zeppelin, maybe they want to be the Pixies or whatever it is, But my interest in that kind of content, like, can you like just reach, like, I think of it sometimes in terms of like, this band built an incredible bridge to get from like, to communicate from like where they were to where I am, right? Mm-hmm. But that whole bridge building is not as interesting or devastating to me as somebody that's just like, I'm not going to even build, I'm just going to reach out and touch you. Like, I'm not going to like have this whole thing. I'm just a human being, and I'm just going to like, do that. And that kind of egalitarian level playing field is what drives me, what keeps me going, and what impresses me about my own songs that I feel like have, where I feel like I've fulfilled that mission in myself, where I've made something that I feel like is what I want to hear in music. And I don't think that that's what a lot of people are listening for. So when somebody is interested in a buzz band, or when somebody is interested in being that kind of band, or I have nothing against them, it's just not it's not the aspect of the art that I'm looking for, or what I'm the feeling that I want to get out of seeing a gig or listening to somebody's record, or that I want to create with my own gigs and with my own records, is just a different sort of thing.
Yeah.
That makes the rest of that not that relevant, because it's completely merit-based. Somebody could be great and have no success, but if I think they're, it's the same for everybody. I'm not like, everybody has their own tastes and what they think is great, and sometimes that matches up with what the public thinks, and sometimes it doesn't. And that's this, the same for everybody. But I don't remember what the second part of the question was.
The like mountain goats trajectory sort of.
Well, who's to say what, why does that click with a lot of people at a certain point? What, obviously, Mountain Goats signing to 4AD and making properly produced records was a major step in that happening. Would that have happened if they continued on without doing that? I don't know. What would happen to me if I hadn't signed to Rough Trade? That changed everything for me. Even though I'm still very under the radar, that was a tremendous change for me. But if the question is like, what is stopping me from being the Mountain Goats? Well,
I don't mean to make it like it's obviously not your choice to make, but
I mean,
I guess what I'm just curious about is like, I don't know. It's obviously there's no way to pinpoint it because there's.
Well, you know what? Also, the crowd of the Mountain Goats, the audience, and the audience for Andrew Jackson Jihad, and the audience for Kimya Dawson, the audience for the Planet X Records cast of characters, they're very, in some ways they're very middle American. They're not, and I've always been very New York City. I mean, I grew up in New York City, and my sense of alienation from the world, like the friction between like my aesthetic and the battle that I'm fighting, or the things that satisfy my aesthetics, are not coming from the same damage that these people are. A lot of them are recovered, whether they're dealing with narcotics users or they've grown up in really rough, sort of stereotypical trailer park, meth environments. They have a lot of friends who have died. They have, people that die in drunk driving accidents. They've been through rehab. They've been, they're coming from the America, the real America, like working class America.
Yeah.
And these kinds of experiences, or having, I know I'm generalizing quite a bit, but I never had any contact with that culture growing up. Like meth is not a New York City thing. I don't know why I'm even keep talking about meth, but there's something, a sort of lower working class, mostly white, mostly not urban audience is what I see in the fan bases of these people. And these people are also, I don't know a lot of them personally, but a lot of them are, the people that I do know personally, they are coming from like, they were addicts, and they can relate to growing up in a fucked up place where, you're getting drunk too much, or or people that are like growing up in very regular middle America conservative areas, but maybe they have a gender identity that doesn't fit into like what they're supposed to be in that area. And there's a kind of those artists are speaking to the outsiders of America who exist in red states maybe, or who exist in not the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I feel like that taps into, those people have a constituency and an audience that has a sort of shared backdrop that is not me at all, in the sense that like, that's not my constituency. Like those aren't, that's not my background. So I don't reach those people in the same way. Like I'm not like they can't turn to my music and be like, he understands our struggles in life, because my struggles, or everybody has their own struggles, but mine are maybe like just, they don't have as many people that relate to them because of like not that many. There's no band in New York City that's from New York City,
Right.
Like I don't fit into the New York City bands either, because I'm not like the Yeah Yeah Yeahs or any of these other bands that are like, we're gonna move to New York City and be a band. Like I've just always been there, and that's not even like, that's not what New York City bands are. Like, New York City bands are not bands that just grew up there. So I'm sort of disconnected from all these cultures that have more representatives. And I think that's one reason that keeps me from having, no matter how good it is that I might eventually get at what I do, there's just not much of a constituency for it.
Yeah, I never would have. That was not the angle I was expecting. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's we should run some tests and see how that adds up. That's pretty crazy.
I mean, do you feel like that? I mean, I'm just talking off the top of my head, like inventing this as I'm speaking it. It's not like something I ever thought about before this very moment.
Sure.
So I could probably think about it more and correct myself, or, think of like, what the hell was I talking about? Maybe, I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm just talking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I see what you're getting at, and as you said that you were generalizing because I don't know. I mean, I think for that argument that can be made about all the bands you mentioned, like the very opposite argument could be made about any other number of bands that are, like Jonathan Richman maybe, or something. Like he doesn't really write about any of that stuff. He's a pretty straight shooting guy. A different era, I guess, so maybe not as
well. Very different. I mean, I just saw him in New York the other week. I hadn't seen him play in years. I'm a big John. I have every record he ever made. You know? Or I might be missing like 2 of them or something. But I mean, that guy started out in 1969.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
This is like not a modern. It's he's not in the position of being the Mountain Goats or of being, Bill Callahan or Will Oldham or whatever. There's a he seems very youthful, of course, but
right,
I mean,
right.
he's a very different generation.
Yeah. That was admittedly a poor example. I'm trying to.
But
think
but he's certainly an original template for all of us.
Sure.
Maybe some more than others. I don't know how many of these other people are Jonathan Richman fans. I'm certainly a very devoted Jonathan Richman fan, and he's an important, guiding light for me in terms of like what kind of artist he can be. But. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting person to bring up. But,
yeah. I don't know why he came to mind, I guess.
But how many of these people, like at the crowd that was at the show last night, right? Did any of them know Jonathan Richman? Did any of them even know Daniel Johnston?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell did I know when I was 18, 19? I didn't know any of that stuff anyway. I listened to Jimi Hendrix. Like,
right.
I was like, so are these things even touchstones for the youth of America?
Yeah. I'm hesitating to bring this guy up again because I've already done that. I don't want it to be a theme on this podcast, but Mac DeMarco is maybe a more topical example. I can't stand him, but I don't know. I guess I don't know. That's maybe a more modern, like, because when I look at that guy, like, I don't know, what's he writing about? He's not.
I've only ever heard like one song, I think, just because I was like curious about what the phenomenon was, because I know that he's right now, or at least like last year or whatever it was, he's kind of in some ways the top new act for like who the youth is going nuts for in New York City anyway, in terms of like utter hipness, like on an underground respect level, and like plays huge shows. Seems like he's like a new modern a recent phenomenon. What about Courtney Barnett? Like that's somebody else I could point to. That's maybe the most recent, of the last year. Somebody that everybody was talking about within the last year.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think she's great. I don't know. I mean, it's all speculation. It's not like we're gonna really arrive at a conclusion, but it's just kind of interesting to think about.
And who are your, what people do you look to as like your guiding lights, or like what, which artists show you the way of what you would like to do as an artist, or, obviously everybody wants to be. The goal is to be your own unique artist. But there's people you could point to be like.
Sure. I don't know. I mean, like starting out, I just like kind of like what sort of got me down the path of, indie rock, whatever, was like Pavement and like Granddaddy and bands like that, and like Silver Jews, and so those were kind of my introductions, I guess, into that sort of world. But then as time goes on and I'm actually playing in a band and figuring out, the whole touring thing and like the logistics of all that, I try to look at it as realistically as possible, because obviously, I don't know, like it's a weird thing. Like I wouldn't want to be one of these like all of a sudden super popular bands, you know what I mean? And that's, obviously not to say that would happen or anything, but I always have this sort of like in my mind like puritanical sort of like if anything's going to happen, it probably should take 10 or 15 or 20 years for it to happen, and I'll feel a lot better about that if it does than if all of a sudden, that, again, that's obviously just all theoretical. But so I don't like nowadays, like, present day, like people I would look to for that sort of thing. I don't know. I mean, there aren't a lot of like active bands that haven't been around for 15 or 20 plus years that I don't know, that I even like can think of, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of, maybe Andrew Jackson Jihad would maybe be a good example. Like I guess any band that sort of seems like they still have that work ethic and they're actually putting in the hours to get what they want out of it. Like that's, if I'm gonna have like a clean conscience about anything that I'm gonna do, I want it to be done that way. And so like you're a person that I would, put in that, sort of tier of people. And but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I as time goes on more and more, I just start to think like almost like what you were saying about the, festival bands that if they're, they spend a couple years making a ton of money and then they're not relevant anymore. I think about just the prospect of essentially do what you got to do to make it, whatever you need to do to make it work out, whether it aligns with what I've thought all this time or not,
Well, do you write all the songs in your band?
Yeah.
Because even that already puts you in a different category than, say, Pavement or, obviously Silver Jews is like, there's a songwriter and then there's musicians around him. But, like, that's a different thing. That's more of like, in that sense, it's almost like the wrong question. It's the wrong question to be like, what bands do you like? It's kind of more like, well, what songwriter, because then the Mountain Goats is a songwriter-based thing. Yeah. And, there's like, it's kind of like a different category.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, like, who I'm, like, I don't know, Bill Callahan is a huge one for me. But all those people, like I said, those are people who have been doing it long enough where they're kind of secured in their little section of indie rockdom. And, like, I think Bill Callahan will just be able to do what he's been doing for the last 10 years. And, I think things will be okay for him.
And yet, how many people how many of his records do you have? Or how often do you buy a new one when it comes out? Like when there's a new Will Oldham album, how many people go and buy? Like, it must just be the most dedicated people, because at this point, it's like, if you're a pretty big fan of Will Oldham, you might already have 12 of his albums. Like, do you need 40 of them? It's really scary as an artist to think, like, well, what is the saturation point here? What, I'll basically buy every Jonathan Richman album. The Fall, when there's a new Fall album, I'll go buy it. If there's a new Stephen Malkmus and the Jicks album, I'll go buy it.
Yeah.
But there's not that many artists that I actually. There are plenty of people I'm like, I have their, I'm not a follower or collector of their stuff in that way.
Right.
Like, if there's a new Thurston Moore record and somebody's like, have you heard the new one's really great, like you should check it, it's like, all right, but I might or might not, but
right.
I don't care if I'm missing 3 of them or, or it's like, it's not part of my identity that I have to buy all of them the way that it is with certain artists.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I mean, I feel like there's maybe 5 to 10 people where, like, yeah, I'll buy.
Even that's a lot.
Yeah, I feel like it is. I mean, I'll buy the new Stephen Malkmus. I'll pre-order that. I'll pre-order the new Bill Callahan. I'll pre-order the new Granddaddy when they're recording their new LP now. I'll get that. And yeah, I mean, like John K. Sampson and
I've never heard that name.
From the Weaker Thans. You know that band?
I've heard that name, but only peripherally. I have no idea what that is.
Okay. So yeah, no, I mean, yeah, there's like Yo La Tango. I'll buy all the new Yo La Tango.
Yeah,
stuff.
they lost me at Summer Sun, but then now I'm but I'm actually in a lucky position with that stuff because I can get free copies. Just because Rough Trade is now partnered with Beggars, who includes Matador, so I can get free copies of certain things. So I'll go to the office and I'll be like, oh, can I get a copy of the new? But I don't know if I would actually walk into a store and pay $20 for. It's hard to say at this point, but I do have. I mean, I'm a Yo La Tango fanatic. They're like one of my favorite bands. I have basically every record except Summer Sun, which I never. Maybe I should just get it at this point. But there again, I mean, they started in like 1985 or something.
Right. Yeah, so I don't know. It's just weird. I hate to sound like one of those like. I don't like my generation doesn't get like that's not what I'm trying to sound like. I don't say things like there are no good bands anymore or anything like that. But I guess I don't know. It's interesting. Like. I don't know. I just don't know what the point of reference should be. You know what I mean? Like
you mean for this day?
For like like
modern
contemporary.
I don't think anybody ever does at the time. The sifter of time just kind of like
Decides.
Will everything. Yeah, what will rise to the surface and what records will remain word of mouth important things. It's interesting to like. To see how much of a phenomenon the Moldy Peaches still are. I mean, they had one record that came out 15 years ago, and it's still impactful, as far as I can see. And some people are like, "Oh, well, the Juno being on the Juno soundtrack made," but they were. It seemed to me just the same prior to that. There were years before Juno, where the band already hadn't existed for a while, and it was still. That record is. You walk into record stores, that's still in the racks available, and I could imagine that there's still 15-year-old kids in the middle, somewhere in Iowa, that are going to be hipped to it and be like, you got to check out this band, and like that. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I guess just in the sense of like modern, even to me, the fact that I've been doing this. For that period of time, like I can already sort of see what stuff has some stuff that's fallen away, and some stuff that remains. That seems like maybe it's been canonized in a certain way. Like maybe people will still be buying old Palace records, and obviously Pavement. People are still getting into Pavement. Sebadoh, there's bands that are like, how do you, you're 18 years old. How do you even know this stuff? It's, 20 years ago. But there's bands that are still, and they don't hear about it through magazine, they're not even, it's just word of mouth, really.
Yeah. Sorry, I started getting some lag in the headphones, so I was taking them off, but we're still good. But we can wrap up in the next few minutes. But you're right. I mean, I think the kind of the ultimate point you're making is that time decides who matters and who doesn't, essentially, and I don't know. I'm sure there will be, I don't know. People are going to find what should be found, I guess.
If they're
ultimately.
even still into music. That's what I always fear. I'm like, well, maybe even that is just a product of our current generations, that we even feel like, well, maybe like it's not natural or necessarily ongoing that people even care about music to this extent. I'm like, well, look at the monks and Os Mutantes. Like, it took, 30 or 40 years, but now you go to anybody's apartment and they have those records.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's just because we are of a little bubble of time where it's cool to get into the Incredible String Band or something, like, but that doesn't mean that culture of being interested in music is even going to continue.
Right.
Like, and I'm always like, well, at some point kids are just going to get into architecture and they're going to think it's so bizarre that we cared this much about music. And they're going to walk around and be like, you guys were into all this, and a million people picking up guitars and banging out chords. Who cares? You were totally ignoring that this building was being built in, in frickin' Kansas City. And, like, how could nobody have cared at the time? Like, it's crazy how nobody noticed how beautiful that building was and how groundbreaking that building was 20 years ahead of its time. And, like, you could have been there at the inaugural, thing, and you didn't even think about it. Like, it could be anything.
Yeah.
It's just our little filter is, like, music and knowing about it and knowing about the past of it and knowing what's really good and what sucks and what the masses are into. Like, that's just one particular angle that is not necessarily going to be shared whatsoever by coming generations.
Yeah, that's a weird thing to think about, but yeah, you're right. I mean, that sort of thing crosses my mind just with I don't know, I talked to the singer of this band, Hallelujah the Hills, and he says the same kind of stuff with regard to, like, streaming music and Spotify and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is only a very small window of time that we're dealing with here, and, like, no one could know how it's all gonna unfold. So I don't know, man. That's some weird stuff. But yeah, I don't know. We just hit the hour mark, so I guess.
Yeah, here in the podcast era, the brief window of time
sure,
that is the podcast era.
Exactly, we're talking about all this on a brand new medium that I don't know.
It's going to dry up and go away, the likes of radio mysteries or something.
Sure, yeah. Well, I guess we'll see. How do you feel about all this? Do you think is there anything we should add?
I could always talk, and I'll just talk forever, and I'm just a yapper. I'll just go on and on. That's why I'm bad. That's why I shouldn't even do interviews.
Well, no, this was great. I appreciate you talking to me, and I could have totally done this for another 3 hours if we had the time to. So if you ever want to do it again, I'll be here.
Yeah, maybe it'll just be the Jake and Jeffrey podcast.
Sure,
It'll just be, us talking about music.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll make you a regular. All right, well, yeah, thanks for talking to me, Jeffrey. Looking forward to the show tonight.
Thanks, yeah, me too.
That was myself and Jeffrey Lewis talking for about an hour. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Go to thejeffreylewisSite.com, pick up a copy of Manhattan on whatever format you're most comfortable with. Pick up the latest issue of Fuff while you're there. Check out the tour dates, like Jeffrey Lewis on Facebook, and keep your eye out. Like Spark and Fizz on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob C. McKelvey. And again, I'm just going to keep sending out these reminders. If you can leave a review for the show on iTunes, if you can share a link to it on Facebook or tweet it out to your followers, share it on Instagram, just call up your best friend and be like, hey, why am I calling you in the age of podcasts? I should have just texted you this information, but since we're here, check out Jake McKelvey's podcast. We'll have a new episode up in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.